Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and today I've got something a little bit different for you. This is neither a battle replay, nor is it a let's play. This is going to be a little modding tutorial and some discussion of 0.97 and one of the big new features that hitherto hasn't been discussed at all that you'll see coming to you in 0.97. This is probably the feature that I'm the most excited about, and is, in my opinion, very important. But before that, I want to thank you guys for your patience so far. I know I haven't exactly been keeping up with videos like I said I was going to, but that's because I've been working very hard on some of the stuff that I'm going to show you in just a few moments. So this is going to be something of a tutorial. It has come to my attention that a lot of people aren't really too sure about how to use the battle editor in Medieval 2 Total War, and it's fairly simple. It's a temperamental beast, and it has its own little weird quirks, pretty well like any program you're ever going to use. But yeah, I'm going to be teaching you how to use the battle editor along the way. I'm going to discuss some of the new assets that we're bringing into the battle editor from BFME, that being Battle for Middle-earth for the uninitiated. And yeah, just discussing this new feature that is, in my opinion, extremely cool. So what you can see before you is a map that I've been working on for the past week. It is very much work in progress. This is nowhere near what it's going to look like when I'm finished. I've got a lot of empty space that I want to fill in with some orcish buildings and just add a lot of flavor to this. This is going to be a map that is the ruins of DOL GULDUR, so you can see the hill up there in the back. That's going to be where the citadel is. The hill won't be inside the playable area. If we kind of scroll over here, you'll see a big red line that marks the playable area. Now, by default, everywhere inside the red line, it assumes that you're going to have 8 players. So this is as big as the map is ever going to be. When you're playing on lower player settings, like 2 or 3, the map will be smaller, so you might not be able to include all of the ruins. But I tend to make my maps under the assumption that there is a very large amount of people playing them. So I'd like to try and balance for the largest case scenario. I'd like to create my maps for the largest case scenario, and then everything else in there, it's usable, but it's not quite the same experience. Yeah, that's just sort of how I like to plan things out. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of these assets here. A lot of them come from a lot of lag in the battle editor. A lot of them come from Battle for Middle-earth. We've got some different like orc tents, and this is a new orcish fence. I've got another variant of the fence that's a little bit more. It's more like a barricade and less of a stake fence. Got these little tents and stuff here. A little smaller tent for utility and things like that off to the side. Right here, you're gonna see one of the goblin tents. Very jagged, covered in a lot of metal. Another orc tent over here as well. So very usable for things like the orcs of Gundabad, and then of course when you're making Misty Mountains themed maps or themed areas on a map, then you're going to have a lot of these tents here available to you as well. This is one of 4 variants. I have to reconvert the other ones because there's some problems with them. But yeah, you're going to have up to 4 variants of Misty Mountain tents. Little kind of flavor things like this little banner right here. That's planted in a pile of debris and what is probably human bones. Could be orc bones. I know they like to eat each other. Also got a lot of scaffolding, little flavor objects like this. So this is one section of scaffolding. I've got another one in here, and I've got a third one over here. And there's a little bit of like ruined bits of wood just to make it look like things are under construction, which is very much the goal that I'm going for with the ruins of DOL GULDUR. I want this to be set at a time when Sauron is beginning to reassert himself in Middle-earth, but hasn't yet reached his full power. So these are the ruins of DOL GULDUR, and a lot of these battlements are going to be encircled by these wooden scaffolding, just to give the sense of things being under construction. But I'm also going to mix in, you see, those goblin tents there, little tents and stuff like that to give the map a very lived-in feel. I want it to be like an inhabited ruin, but not quite at full strength yet. Another piece of scaffolding right here, and of course the walls themselves actually consist of about 2 different sections of L-shaped wall, and I've just combined them in weird ways and made these like strange kind of snaking paths because I wanted to give DOL GULDUR this feel of this not really being natural, not being orcish, not being elven, being something else entirely. And seeing as Sauron is the one who would have erected this fortress, or would have very least been done under his tutelage or his supervision, it's going to be weird. It's going to have this strange vision that's unique to him as a Maya, as an immortal spirit who's been corrupted over thousands of years, has all this experience to draw on. So, yep, that's kind of the the impression that I wanted to give here. Oop. Yeah, it's very temperamental, this thing. It'll flip around a lot. So I apologize in advance, but there's not really anything I can do about it. Another little bit here, a little Mordor banner. I'm going to be adding an Isengard variant as well. That's going to have the famous White Hand of Saruman on it, so you'll be able to make maps for basically all of the Orcish factions. You'll be able to have some Misty Mountains flavors, some Isengard flavors, and of course some Orcs of Gundabad, who are very much the eponymous Orcs I think that we've come to expect. They've got that typical Orcish savage covered in furs and bone and spike and metal mixed in. So a lot of these assets work really well for them, but there's also some other cool stuff in here as well. So another little Orc camp right here. An Orc tower. I'm going to be adding a second variant. It's a little bit taller, but a little bit thinner, I think. But yeah, it's just nice to have lots of variety. We'll pop on over here. For those of you that played Battle for Middle-earth, this is going to be like the central kind of building to the Isengard Tower, or to the Isengard's, it's called the Isengard Tower in the files. That's where that came from. But it's like the central unit of the Isengard base that you build everything around. So I wanted this particular area to be a bit more Orcish, and then you'll kind of have a transition. So I'll talk about the transition in a second and about map layout, and we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty details and some tips about making maps. But I want to show off some more assets first. Over here, got like a troll pit, a little bit of flavor here. It's just like some dead, looks like an Incan peasant from Medieval 2, impaled on the inside there. Little Wildman hut. There's I think 3 other variants of this hut that will be coming and being made available in the battle editor once I manage to get the models working. Another little bit here. This is supposed to have like a banner on it. It's like a human skeleton that's hung up here. I wasn't able to get it working, but nonetheless, it does kind of make like this cool little thing that like maybe there was someone hung up there earlier and they just kind of collapsed into nothingness because the Orcs left them out to be, you know, just destroyed by the elements. Stuff like that. It does add a little bit of flavor, so I decided to keep it in. Over here, if you took a good look at his camp, it's got a little tower on it. I decided to detach the tower. One sec, guys. Got to turn off my Discord. Yeah, sorry about that. So I decided to detach the tower just so you have a bit more options. And then over here, another bit of ruins. You can see some rubble here. That's going to be something you can place as well. Another little bit of scaffolding. I try to put them on the corners here so they kind of hug the building. And I'll talk a little bit about why I do the things in just a minute. Some more scaffolding. Yeah, you guys kind of get the getting the measure of what it is that we're trying to do. What do we got over here? This little Orc pit, which is nice. You can pop that into some corners pretty easily. This big old Orc yurt here, which makes a nice little central piece for like an Orc camp. Maybe something that the chieftain would inhabit, and etc., etc. And then we've got an open mining pit over here as well. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about this map, and it's going to give you some tips and stuff like that for making your own maps in the battle editor. Something that I'm not a big fan of is hard lines, and unless you're dealing with jagged rock formations, in which case that kind of thing can work. I really dislike hard lines, so I think there might be a good example of that over here. So when you're playing with the tools in the battle editor, let's go to the landscape heights here. You're going to have these little things pop up. You can of course minimize these so you can see what the hell you're doing. But I'm going to take this right here. We're going to just like raise the terrain ever so slightly. And there's not one default setting, so if you look on your keyboard, I don't know if it's different for like non-QWERTY keyboards, but for me, I'm using a QWERTY keyboard, and the comma and the period button are the buttons that will increase or decrease the strength. So the period will increase the strength, and you can see it down there at the bottom right, and that goes all the way up to 100. The comma will decrease it. If we put it at like 50, it is much more dramatic, and you can see that it really does make a lot of like peaks, and it looks like this can be useful for rocks, and you can definitely see that because rocks can be jagged, but I haven't seen too many like jagged hills. So one of the things you can do once you raise stuff up is to smooth it back down. There's a nice little smooth tool here, and you control it the same way. So you just play with those two buttons there. That's universal for every tool, and you can use that to smooth out some of those jagged lines, which I find is very, very useful because it just doesn't look good when you have these obviously artificial Ooh, a little bit of lag there. Obviously, artificial bits of land. Like, it just looks ugly. So smooth them down. You are going to lose height when you do this. So sometimes you have to be a little bit tactical about it. But I actually kind of like the positioning of this hill and kind of the way it is. So I'm actually going to save. And I was going to talk to you about your save hotkey, which is your lifesaver. It's just Control S, like anything else. You're going to get a little sanity report there. It just tells you. I think this is really more for scenarios. It's not really something you have to worry about in the battle editor. I've never really paid attention to it, and my maps work just fine. You guys have seen them on YouTube, etc., etc. So there you go. But a little note on the save tool. The battle editor is an old and temperamental program. It will crash. I have never made a map where the battle editor has at one point not crashed on me. It just doesn't happen. You are going to get a crash. You need to accept that it's inevitable and save every time you are happy with something. Because otherwise it's going to be gone forever. It does not save automatically for you. You could spend 3 hours on this and not get a crash, and then you get one sudden boom, all your work is gone. So save. For the love of God, save. And make sure that you save as, right? So if we go to save game here, we could go to like test 1, 2, 3. Make sure that you save it as that, because otherwise you'll just save over whatever template you've been using, and that's the name that it will have, and you might not be able to find it later. So that's another good note. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the other tools here. The plateau tool is an interesting beast. So we need that. It gets used in conjunction with the heights tool. So if we kind of raise up some heights here, and then we take our plateau tool, pop it on top, it will make a flat surface out of that jagged area, and we can continue to do that. A nice little tip for this is that it actually does. I think there's like a thing that you can do. Yeah, so if you scroll over this and hit shift, it will sample that height. Oops. And then it will keep whatever you do at that height. So it's good for, that's a nice little tip for like making walls and making them of a more or less uniform height. But I do not want this here, so I'm just going to Control Z that away. Boom, Control Z is another really useful thing. If you guys have like ever used Photoshop or Paint or Word, which I assume you have living in this day and age, it functions a lot in the same way. I don't think that there's like a Control A key where you can select everything, but it would probably only be used for nuking stuff anyway. I can't think of a single scenario in which a Control Alt, like select all key would be useful unless you're just trying to nuke everything for your own satisfaction. The other thing that we want to talk about, so we've learned a little bit about how to use the tools here. The smudge tool is the fourth one. As far as I can tell, it works very much like the smooth tool, and I've never really, I don't know what it does, so it's hard to say that I don't need it. But it seems to, like, to me, it just seems to function very similar to the smooth tool. It's like a weird mix of like the smooth tool and the height tool. I've never really found that I needed it, and I was able to do this entire map without ever clicking on that button once, and for most of the time I forget about it. So I know it's a terrible tutorial. I'm not telling you how to do every single thing, but I don't know how to use everything properly. So in the Dark Cloud, I'm sure will chime in, and so will Kuro, and they probably have a good idea of what the smudge tool does, but I've never found it necessary, so I've never really found out. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about terrain, because terrain is, I feel like terrain is one of those things that new people coming into the battle editor, oop, a little bit of lag there, won't think about and will just place haphazardly. So if we look here on the ground, we can see that there's a very clear, but it's kind of subtle, but one has a little bit more black and like dark green in it, and then this one's a bit more lighter, and there's like some white, and I think maybe a little bit of yellow in there as well. The darker texture is mud, and mud will slow units down that are on it. I've put mud everywhere in here because I'm very much aware of the fact that it will slow units down. Oof, I hate that. I really hate that lag. And I want that to be the case. So don't place your mud haphazardly. It will have gameplay implications, and you need to be aware of what those are. Most of them are not a big deal. So forest, well, that's we're on vegetation. Oops. We'll talk about vegetation later. But if we open that there, you can see the textures. We'll move this window over so it's not on top of our brushes tab, so we can use them both independently. Actually, let's keep that open for now. So there's all these different textures here, right? Some of them have gameplay implications like mud do, some of them do not. In Reforged 0.97, we have added terrain bonuses back into the game. They are not huge. They are usually only to the tune of about +1 for rank and file units. Elites don't get them at all. Cavalry and polearms will get penalties in the forest. Pardon me. But as far as I'm aware, it only really has implications for the raw attack damage of a unit. But that being said, the ones that you want to keep in mind are Scrub, Dense, there's 2 different kinds of Dense Scrub. Forest is the one that will institute penalties for polearms and cavalry. Scrub will give bonuses to heavy infantry, and then I think there is Sand as well, which will give bonuses to certain kinds of infantry in certain factions. And then there is a Snow texture, which you can't actively place, but you can put winter settings onto many of our maps. And that will increase the effectiveness of light infantry. So when you're placing Scrub or Sand or Mud or Forest, you need to be aware that certain units will get combat bonuses or penalties on those certain terrain types. So I've used Scrub and I've used Mud. And I've done that for a very specific reason. This is a map for the new DOL GULDUR faction, which I can't really tell you a whole lot about. I can tell you some stuff. If you guys want to know about it down in the comment section, please ask me, and I will share what information I do have. I have seen a few of their units and things like that, and I have had chats with Kuro, and he's the one designing the faction, so I know how they work. But they will be infantry focused. So, infantry, and specifically heavy infantry focused. So there's a lot of scrub terrain here, which will benefit them. Inside of their fortress, there's far less mud, because I didn't want that to be a hindrance. But outside, there's a ton of mud, meaning that anybody approaching these ruins is going to be doing so with some difficulty. So there's going to be areas of their army that are moving faster than other areas of their army. It's going to be a little bit harder to keep your forces together and to maintain your cohesion, which is going to benefit DOL GULDUR greatly. Another note on this map is that this is part of the Tug of War series. So we've seen, I don't think we've seen the new Thranduil's halls yet. Unless we have, unless someone has posted it somewhere, but I'm not aware of it. But so Thranduil's Hall is going to be like the opposite end of the spectrum from the ruins of DOL GULDUR, and each one of those maps, when you get deeper and deeper in enemy territory, is going to favor your enemy more and more and more in certain ways, not in insurmountable ways, but in little ways. And this is one of those little ways, which brings me into another interesting factor to keep in mind when you're playing with the battle editor. Excuse me, I have to clear my throat a little bit. That's better. I feel a lot better now. Is that you want to go into this with a plan. When I first started playing with the battle editor, I experimented and I just like did willy-nilly, and you just kind of play with stuff on the fly, and that's a lot of fun, and it's really cool to be creative that way. But when you get into, like, when you start playing around with the camp or the battle editor more and more, you start to realize that every little decision that you make when making the map counts in some way. So I recommend to you to both experiment on your own time, but when you want to get really serious about it, I recommend that you come into this with a plan and you have things, notes, maybe even a small diagram written down before you place a single piece of assets or a single tile of terrain down on your map. You want to have a plan going into this. I had a plan going into DOL GULDUR. It wasn't like a definitive plan. You don't want to be too rigid. And I did kind of adapt it as like the map was progressing, and I like saw certain things that I could do better, or things that I didn't even realize I wanted to do at the time and that I wanted to do suddenly. So be dynamic, but come into this with a plan, and you're going to have some really, really cool maps that you'll be able to share with your friends and share with the community. And yeah, that in turn the rest of the community will be able to share with others. So have a plan is a big, big thing. I went into this knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and I've been working tirelessly to try and finish it. So that's why I haven't really been posting a lot of videos lately, is because I've been working on converting assets, and I've been working on adding them progressively into this map. But I probably should have led with that. But anyway, so I digress. We've talked a little bit about terrain. We've talked about some kind of general tips and things like that. We've talked about DOL GULDUR, but let's actually start placing some stuff. So I've got a new asset here, which I haven't done anything with yet. And that would be Eisen Fence. So, as I mentioned earlier, got a little orc fence here. Let's take our Eisen Fence, and let's take a look at the difference between the two. So it's a little bit more like barricade-like There's a little shadow on there. I probably have to like mess with the mask a little bit on this and get rid of that so that it just blends into the terrain a bit better. But for now, you can see the differences. This one's a little bit taller, a little bit sturdier, and I'm thinking that maybe that would look nicer on this section of the map than what I've got going for me right now. So what I'm gonna do, that one's gonna be a bit more complicated, so we'll get into that. But if you are in the little tool down here, it says place and edit world package tool, and you go and you just open that, and then you can scroll over something with your mouse, left click on it, and then you'll select it, and then you can change the position of it with O, or you can hold down shift and you can change its elevation. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to, but you can just hit escape. It'll bring up the menu and it'll get rid of that little piece. Maybe there's a better way of doing this. This is the only way I know of doing it, and it's just really quick. So I'm going to keep the two little bits on the side there, just as markers of kind of where I want to place things. Let's go ahead and save that so far. Let's take our Isengard fence here. Going to left click on it. Ooh, seems that I have a little bit of work to do in terms of changing its. There's like a thing I can do in IWTE that like helps it blend into the terrain better, and obviously I need to do that. So let's do that. There we go. We place that. Place another one here, and you can change the elevation. Shift. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and find a means of blending them together, which is not easy. And once I'm satisfied with more or less where it is, I'll place it. But as you can see, we've actually eliminated some of our terrain, so like that's why I need to fix this. So if you place something and then remove terrain from under it, it will float. So I'm just going to Control V my good old fence here back, because obviously this asset needs a little bit of work. And then for sometimes, like when you escape out of them, they like place themselves again elsewhere, and I don't know why it does that. And then we run into a weird battle editor bug here where we've like edited this like terrain with the tools in some way, and then it makes all the vegetation float. So they won't make the vegetation flow forever. So if we save here, and we just reload it, come on. Let me head back over here. Our fence is still there. Nothing is floating. Nothing's gonna mess with our camera. Again, this is a temperamental beast. It's gonna mess with you in certain ways, and it can be frustrating, but it's also very satisfying to use. So I'm not gonna place any more of the Isengard fence because I have to fix that in IWTE, so that when you guys actually go to place it yourselves, it's not going to have this big square of terrain around it that just makes things awful for you. So that's something that I have to fix. Let's see. Oh, yeah, check this out. Something that we converted from BFME. There's another texture for it that has like glowing runes on it, which I'm going to try and implement. IWTE is kind of limited in the things they can do, though, so it might not end up working out that way. But yeah, another look here at DOL GULDUR, and then let's move on to like our own little. Yeah, I made a little orc camp here. Currently in the process of fixing it. Oh yeah, before we move on, I'm gonna mention something here. So you can see a lot of trees and stuff like popping out of places. Obviously, these are not where I want trees to be. There is a vegetation tool. What we're gonna do, oops, is I don't recommend doing this right now, just because. Well, I'll explain why as I go along. If you hold down Shift and then left click, you will remove things. If you just left click, you will place trees. And then it works that way for every single tool in IWTE. Shift will always invert whatever functionality that the tool has. So for smooth, it will be like anti-smooth. I don't really use it. I usually just Control Z if I want to undo something. But if you're playing with landscape heights, for example, instead of raising up hills, you can bloop, make a pit. Useful for making rivers, especially with the template that I have now. Not all maps are going to work this way. Not every map is going to be like, boom, if you immediately go a little bit below the flat area, then you're going to have water. It's just because of the template that I'm using. It is directly at sea level. There are coordinates on the map that you can pick in the battle editor. It'll show you like a map of the campaign map. You can kind of pick and choose where you want to be, and it will tell you how high you are and what kind of terrain it is, and yada yada yada. I believe 0.97 will launch, however, with a flat template, the one that I'm using right now, because I find it to be the most versatile. There are drawbacks to using it, namely that certain assets, like the Isengard open pit mine, which we'll fly over here real quickly and look at, they go below sea level, because the map itself is exactly at sea level, so they go below, and consequently the the pit area gets flooded. It looks a bit weird. Not every map's going to do that, but the template will. So there are some drawbacks to it, but it's also a fresh start. You don't start out with a ton of terrain. You don't have to spend like 2 hours trying to flatten everything out for yourself. It's already done for you, so it's quite useful. But let's go ahead. Let's save there. Let's go ahead and load Test Desert. This is something that I made up a little bit earlier before I started this video, because it shows you a really good practice to get into. So if you guys will remember a little bit earlier, we talked about the red line. Now, red line is something very important to keep, to be cognizant of at basically all times. So they've got a big old area out here, and you're like, wow, this map is huge. I totally want to build something on every single inch of the map. Well, you can, but you can't interact with certain parts of the map. So when you zoom out too far, you lose sight of the red line. So for me, a good practice is to, and this is again why having a plan is important. So I will come in with the terrain type that I want to be most prominent, and I'll paint that everywhere. So for example, this is like a desert test, and then I'll go to the red line and I'll pick a texture that contrasts very nicely with the majority texture, and I'll pop a little bit of it right down on the red line. So if we look in every direction, we can see exactly where our terrain feature, or our playable terrain is, and then we can kind of act accordingly. Now, one thing I recommend that you do is absolutely build outside the red line. It looks, for me, I don't like maps to look artificial, so I will build outside of the red line just for the purpose of making it immersive, because why is there this red line here and then suddenly civilization ends after it? It's really weird. So I'll show you an example of that, but like, I think you guys kind of get where I'm coming from here. It's just, you have a map like this. I recommend that you even make a template and then just save it like this so that you can start all your maps this way. But maybe you don't want to always play on a desert terrain. I mean, you can fix that easily enough. So maybe make like a scrub terrain, or like something a bit more neutral, and then, you know, make this kind of template based on that. This was just, it's just an example. So let me see here. I've got a lot of maps in here. Some of them you guys have seen, some of them you probably haven't, and some are scenarios that haven't been released. Yeah, some Witch King scenarios down there as well. Let's see. I think this is a good one. This is one of the winter tournament maps, which you guys have seen before. It was one of the maps that I made, but it does kind of show you a little bit about what I was talking about before. Oh, well, apparently something has changed in one of our patches, so now that is completely flooded underwater. Let me see if I can find something else here. Hopefully my maps still work. Cool. So here's another map from the Tug of War event. This is gonna be like the neutral kind of map. It's the old forest road. It's kind of like, it runs through Mirkwood, and you can see all the little like elven meeting circles on either side. Yeah, it's just kind of cool. It's a little call out to the Hobbit, but I've built. This doesn't exactly show you what I meant before, but I've definitely built areas outside of the main play area, and it's like a, just to give the impression that there is life outside of the borders. So there's this road here that kind of goes off into infinity, and if we can actually zoom up here, you can see that it actually stops abruptly. But you can't see that when you're playing, because you can obviously scroll out a hell of a lot higher here than you normally can when you're playing in the game. But that's just an example, and it helps make your maps more believable, it makes them immersive, and if this is something that you're going to spend a lot of time working on, you want it to be the best possible version of itself that it can be. So I've done it again over here. You can see it's a little bit more obvious that like it kind of ends, but I just wanted to hide like the coastline there. I wanted to give the sense of them being in a bit of a deep valley in the middle of a forest, and obviously you can't do that when there's a big ocean over there. So yeah, I think that's kind of the long and short of how you'd use the battle editor. You can actually, if you go to the, I don't know if you guys saw that click, bottom left over here, edit battle details, or F1 hotkey if you like. You can specify it as a multiplayer or single player map. I've never had problems playing multiplayer on a map that I've labeled single player, so I don't really know if that does anything. But right here, you can see different weather types. So let's go to storm, and we'll have a storm. Sunrise and sunset have the most shadows, and it makes the lighting look really cool. So you can play with it, and you can see how your maps are going to look with different kinds of lighting. And from playing with that tool, that's how I decide like recommended settings. So let's pop over to DOL GULDUR real fast. DOL GULDUR I think has some lighting on it right now, just because I was testing things out a little bit earlier. So it's a bit darker. So for the tug of war event, you can actually add like recommended settings to the description. I think we can, hold on here, let me just get rid of this. Yeah, you can enter a battle description right here, and you can be like, recommend, wow, I can spell. Recommend ed settings. Huge units. Nighttime. Light fog, let's say. Oof, that makes things look a little bit weird. So we're playing with the description there. You can actually see the tiles. Obviously this map is made out of tiles. As far as I know, that's something that won't save into your map, so like I can reload right now and it won't be an issue. Yeah, I don't usually play with the description, but you can. You can also do it after the fact. So I don't really know what was up with it showing me all the like seams and like where the tiles are, but I'm pretty sure that won't save and be on your map. So let's go to the weather function, because that's why we came here in the first place. Go away, faction menu. Let's play with light fog. And then time of day. That would be night. Oof. Oof, that's real dark. But this is just an example, right? So if you wanted to have a night battle, night battles are always a little bit confusing because of how dark that they can be. Let's do it without fog. What if we did sunset? Yeah, that makes it a little bit darker. You can see the fog, you can see the map a little bit more. Still a nice little bit of light in the skybox, and once I add more stuff outside the walls, I add like some hills and some forest and things like that. Then yeah, it becomes interesting and confusing, and it just you can use this to kind of help realize your vision of the map and the battles you'd like to see played on it. Obviously, nobody has to follow that, and in a lot of cases, people probably won't. But it is something that you can do. Let's go to afternoon. Yeah, still a bit foggy here. Fog really messes with your visibility. It's quite nice. Let's do light fog winter. Doesn't really make a difference. What if we did rain? Rain kind of clears things up a little bit. Yeah, still makes it nice and dark. Makes it atmospheric. I haven't actually played with all of these, so I'm kind of just going through this for my own benefit at this point. I wonder what Moria does. Oh, that's neat. That's really cool. And that's like afternoon, too. What's sunrise? Some shadows in there. Now this is a cool combination. So I don't think that this will save in as like the default settings. I'm not too sure. but it's entirely possible. So play around with it, see if that that does anything. But yeah, so that's the battle editor. These are the ruins of DOL Guldur, looking all creepy and foggy, and just gives you this claustrophobic sense. And yeah, one other thing to note: this big hill in the back here. I would like to mention I'm going to put a keep up there, and that's going to be like Sauron's kind of seat of power. Gives that sense to everybody that is in the ruins that they're constantly being watched. Yeah, just think about details. Have a plan going in. A really clear vision of what you want the map to look like and how you want it to play, and just being cognizant of like the fact that these buildings and such do have pathfinding, so you need to be careful with it. So I made this wide enough that there is no way that people have problems going through it. Zoom in a lot. Zoom in a ton to make sure that nothing here is floating, because it's very hard to see because you get this weird perspective when you're from the air, right? You're not always going to see the little tiny teensy details. So if we kind of look here, look around at all of our things, everything is like on the ground. When people zoom in, they're not going to see like floating terrain and crap like that. So yeah, take your time, be detail oriented, have a plan, and most importantly, have fun, be creative. Battle Editor is an awesome tool. Every single scenario or custom map or what have you that you've ever seen in a Medieval 2 game ever has used this in some form or another. I don't think that you can make, even if you make settlements in IWTE, which is something that you can do, and then you just make it's basically a stamp, and then you stamp the settlement onto a map. It still uses Battle Editor. You will still use Battle Editor to smooth out the details. Oops, sorry, that's my phone going off. Yeah, it will still use them in some form or another. So learn to use this. It's an awesome tool. I hope you guys had fun learning this with me. I may do another one of these in the future. Once DOL Guldur is a little bit closer to being finished, maybe I'll do like a video series where I'll work on a map from the ground up, so you guys can kind of see the approach that I personally take. Yeah, if you guys would like that, I have no problems doing that. I love using the Battle Editor. I've been going like ham on it. All of my free time that normally I use for making videos has gone into to converting these assets and to making maps and stuff like that. So I love doing it. If you guys want to see more, please let me know. In any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you found it educating, and I'll see you later.